All right, for today's tutorial, we are making what I think at this point is my favorite of the cookie jars. Stay tuned and see how fun and easy this one is to make. All right, if you've watched my other cookie jar videos, then you know what this first step is going to be. I have a strip of white cardstock. It's about 4 inches long and 3/4 of an inch wide. And I'm going to use, I like to use one of these. This happens to be a big alcohol marker, Sharpie, something like that. The barrel on this is just about the perfect size to make our cookie jar base. And what this is the core, for those of you that haven't watched the cookie jar series before. This is the core that we're going to put our clay onto and bake our clay onto. It's going to form the base, the core for our cookie jar. What I like to do is I roll this around my pen and then I make a mark about where, a little past where the two pieces of, where the two meet, where the ends meet. That way I can put glue here and not here. If I put it here, it'll stick to the pen. Put it here, it doesn't stick to the pen. And then I coat the last, I don't know, 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch or so. It doesn't, I don't measure that. Just coat the end of this so that it will glue against where I don't have glue. And I use a very thick tacky glue for this. You want it to be a very thick glue, and this glue needs to dry. You don't want this glue to still be at all wet when we go to our next step, because our next step will be covering this with our first layer of polymer clay and then baking it. We want this glue completely dry before we stick it in the oven. And this time I accidentally, in the process of marking this mark, I managed to get a mark here, but that's okay, it doesn't matter. This isn't going to show. Neither of those pencil lines is going to show. We're not going to see much of this paper. This paper is simply going to give us a nice finished inside to our cookie jar. And so that our cookie jar is still open. And when we open it, it's hollow inside. Now, really important, 2 things. You want to roll this really tight. The fewer gaps you have in your cardstock, the better, and the straighter, the better. You don't want to go off, kind of off, so it's not straight. You want it rolled as straight as possible. And we slide it off the pen like I did, and we let it sit and dry. When this gets dry, and I'm going to give it a good hour or so, I'm going to go do some other things. Give it a good hour or maybe even 2 or 3. I want that glue to dry all the way. When it's dry, I'll come back. We'll start building our strawberry cookie jar. All right, my glue's had a couple of hours to dry, so I know it's good and dry. One of the reasons we want to make sure that this is dry is any moisture that's still left in there could potentially bubble in the heat of the oven. So we need to be careful with that. We want to be safe, but glue and paper are fine. We just need to be careful. So I have some white clay. This happens to be original Sculpey. Very little of this is going to show when we're done. In fact, when the lid is on our cookie jar, we aren't going to see this at all. This is going to be kind of a liner, a area between our outside clay that will be our design and our inside. And it's also going to form the base and a base to form our lid on. Because we need to build a lid, we need to build up our shape for our cookie jar. So what I like to do is roll out pretty thin. You want this layer to be very thin, and the thing I've noticed that I make a mistake of, the biggest mistake I make is I let this layer get too thick. I have a bad habit of doing that, and then my whole cookie jar looks off. So I'm making a strip. I'm going to that way I can lift it easier. Now I have some TLS. And I've had this sitting upside down. Hopefully I've had it sitting upside down long enough, yeah, that it's going to come out. This bottle of TLS is almost gone. Now, TLS is going to act as our glue. It's going to allow us to attach the raw clay to the layers of whatever is not raw clay. In this case, our paper base. Later on, TLS will allow us to attach raw clay to baked clay, because we want to make sure that everything stays together. And you'll notice I want to butt those edges up. I don't want a big overlap there because that'll make a lump. And we'll be able to tell that lump is there. Now I'm going to see if I can do this on camera. Sometimes I have better luck than others of trimming this on camera. I am trying to concentrate on staying under camera. It's really hard. One of the difficulties I run into, and I think anybody that films making miniatures, is by the time you get the camera down close enough for you guys out there to see what I'm doing, my workspace is smaller than your cell phone. So it's a very small space to try and keep track of being in. I do have it marked off on my tray, but I still manage to wander. And also, I need to watch what I'm doing. I can't spend all my time looking up at the previous screen, because when I do that, I can't make miniatures. So forgive me when I wander a bit. I don't do it intentionally. Even after all these years of doing YouTube, I still struggle with that. So what I'm doing now, I'm taking a little bit more of that clay and I'm going to put it onto the bottom. I want to form a bottom to my cookie jar. We might as well make the bottom white. And that way too, when you look down inside the cookie jar, it will disguise the fact that what you're seeing in there is paper. You have to trim most of the way around there. Let's use our fingers and kind of get most of that off. I'll trim off any excess. There's a little more I want to trim off, but I'm going to have to get it up by my face to trim it off. But this way, when you look down into the cookie jar, once we're all finished, you'll see a white interior and a white base. So I'm going to neaten this up off camera and get it ready to go. Let's go ahead and make the little plug that we're going to make our lid on. And I usually refer to this as the lid base. What I do to make this is, and I've done it a couple of different ways on different cookie jars, and I think the last several, this is how I've been doing it. I roll a snake of clay. See, that one got a little too skinny. I want it to be a size that will fit comfortably inside. This needs to be a little thinner so that my snake is just a little bit smaller than that opening. All right, that will fit. Now I'm going to cut, and I'm kind of rolling as I cut so it stays fairly round. And I want probably about a 1/4 inch slice of that. Make it nice and flat, and then take your cookie jar and make sure, yep, it still fits. If I do this, and it will still go down over that little plug, that way I know that when I build my lid on top of this little piece after it's baked, my lid will fit onto my cookie jar and stay put. So I'm going to bake both of these pieces at the recommended temperature for my clay and my TLS. Recommended temperature is 375 for both. Since my oven tends to drift up about 25 degrees during baking, I've noticed, because do keep a thermometer in your oven. I usually bake at 250. That way I know it's going to go between 250 and 275. I am going to bake these for 10 minutes on a paper plate, just a plain white paper plate. I reuse these paper plates many, many times so they don't fill up the trash. I'm going to get these baked, and then they do need to cool down to room temperature before we add our next step. So I'll be back in just a minute. All right, here are my baked pieces, and they are, I'm going to set them off to the side. They're ready to work with. And I have my red clay that I'm going to cover the outside of my cookie jar with. Now it looks really, really bright and neon on camera. It's not that bright in person. This is a mixture of equal parts Sculpey, I believe it's Red Hot Red, and translucent. Now first, before we go any further, let's talk about red. Red is the color, no matter what medium I'm working with, anywhere from polymer clay to paint to fabric, red gives me the most trouble. It is the most temperamental color to work with. Here's a few of the things it does. Number one, with clay, it tends to leach color onto everything around it. You lay your red clay down and you're going to have a red splotch. It's going to be on your fingers and it's going to transfer to other things. Also, when red is heated, and I find this with fabric even worse than clay, red color shifts quite a bit when it gets hot. It can tend to change color. And red is just, with clay, a lot of times I find that if red is too dense of a clay, it tends to look chalky and it looks dead and dull. That's why this is half translucent and half Red Hot Red. So I am going to roll this out. And you can use any red you've got. I used this red because I had quite a bit of it. I think it'll make a good strawberry color. And the color, I forgot what the color was I picked out first, but I was afraid I didn't have enough of it. This, if I run out, I can mix more with translucent and I'll be fine. Now I am going to do something slightly different than I normally do. So I'm going to roll this top edge over just a little bit. That will give us a little more of a shape of our strawberry. Now, I want to do this, and I want to do this. And I forgot to trim that edge after I turned the camera off. So it's got a little bump down there, but that's okay. We'll work with it. Now be sure you keep this doubled edge to the top. I'm going to make sure that I've got enough, and I'm going to trim this down just a little bit. And do put the end inside, yes, just enough. All right. Now, baked clay, raw clay. We need TLS. We need to glue it. And you'll notice I put my lid base off to the side. We're not going to even think about working with our lid yet. We are going to get, whoops, my hands are shaking this afternoon. Not sure why they weren't this morning. All right. I'm going to bring this up. Now you don't want it to overlap. So where the two meet, go ahead and cut. Pull this extra off the outside. And I might have to pick this up. I might have to turn the camera off and pick this up to get the extra out. I think that's fine. Now, I want to work this out. I want to make it look smooth. And I don't want it sliding up above the top of my cookie jar too far. So I'm going to put it bottom side up and trim this. And I think because Sculpey 3 is a soft clay and translucent makes it even softer, I am going to make this a lot easier on myself by transferring this to my freezer for probably about 20 minutes. And once it has gotten firmed up in the freezer, I will come back and we can go on to getting this shaped the way I want it. All right, this has been in the freezer for right around 20 minutes, and off camera, as soon as I came out of the freezer, I did trim the top nice and flat. I wanted to get that up to my face where I could see it better. And I neatened up the bottom. So I have a couple of tools here, and I have dipped my fingers in cornstarch, and I have my container of cornstarch off to the side, so if my fingers start sticking, I can just reach over and dust them again. So I'm going to take a ball tool and I'm going to kind of, that's where the seam is. Now I'm going to get some clay on my finger, or not some clay, some cornstarch on my finger. And I want to, I don't want a bump where that fold is, where that folded clay is on the inside. I just want it to kind of gradually, although strawberries are not perfectly shaped. Now, I would like it to be a little smoother, but at the same time, it will be fine. All right, now I'm going to take a tool with a point like this. This isn't as sharp as my dental pick. Let me see the difference here. This is a tool made for making holes. Now, if you have a tiny ball tool, that would work also. I like this one. You could probably use a wooden skewer also that's been kind of flattened on the end. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make random little holes, because that's kind of how we expect a strawberry to be textured, to kind of replicate those little seeds on the outside of the strawberry. Don't get too many of them, you know, don't get them too close together, which I think I did there, and try to make them random. So I am going to finish this up. I'm going to do the whole outside with these little dots. Then I am going to bake this at the recommended temperature for probably 10 minutes will be fine. I don't think this is, the clay is not even a 1/4 inch thick. I don't think it's the thickest part of the new clay. So I'm going to let this bake and then cool back to room temperature, and we can start working on the lid. But I want this completely done so I don't get any red clay transferred to my pieces for the lid. So I'll be back when this is textured, baked, and cooled. All right, here is how this turned out. It's baked and completely cooled. In fact, this is the next morning. So we're going to start working on the lid. And I've got the same red clay, and then I've got some green, and this was a Sculpey 3. I think it was emerald green maybe. And again, I mixed it half with equal part translucent clay because I want to keep with that theme. We're going to use just a little bit of this in this step. So let's start by making a lid. I'm just kind of pressing a half circle here. I need to clean off my clay knife. All right, not quite wide enough. And I'm working on the tray, so hopefully I'll have a fairly good flat edge. And right now, I just want to get the part of the lid that's going to show. And a lot of this red part, this red portion of the lid is not going to show on our final cookie jar because we're going to add leaves and stuff to it. All right, there we go. Now let's make sure this is nice and flat. So that, you notice I made it about the same size as the top of this. So I'm going to transfer this. First, I'm going to make a little stem. Take my green clay, and I'm going to make that. Just a little snake. Use a toothpick. I can't talk this morning, obviously. Sure that this is a big enough hole in the top that in the next step I can use some TLS. That actually it's. I don't want to bake it in there though because I want to do some texturing on it. So I don't smush it, I'm going to move this over to my baking plate. And now, let's take this guy. Normally I would bring this right up to my face, but I want you guys to be able to kind of see what I'm doing. Trying to be better about that. All I want to do is just get some texture into this so it doesn't look just like a snake of clay. There. Now, I'm going to bake both of those pieces at recommended time and temperature for my clay, which means 15 minutes about, and no higher than 275. I'm going to bake at 250 because, like I've said repeatedly, my oven does tend to sneak up in temperature. So when these are baked and cooled back to room temperature, I'll come back and we can go to the next step. All right, these are baked and cooled. So now we need to attach these three. This is our little piece that we had from the beginning, our stem and our lid. And then after these are attached and the TLS has cured, then we can start adding some leaves. So I am going to put out just a little bit of TLS here on my tray so that I can dip into it. Let's see, I think I'm gonna, but I think I probably want to get this in first. Let's see, let's double check that this is going to fit. Yes. All right, so this is going to be a multi-step lid. And I think I'm actually going to bake with this piece on first, and I'm going to need a little bed of foil because I want this to be flat. And if I try to stand it on that rounded top, as you can see, it's fairly stable, but I'm not going to trust it in the oven. So off camera, I'm going to make sure that this is where I want it. I'm going to get that right in the middle. I'm going to bake that for 10 minutes, then I'll come back and I'll put the stem on, bake it for 10 minutes. I'll talk to you about that when I come back. And then we can go on to the leaves. So I'll be right back when this is baked and cooled. All right, that is now securely on the bottom of our lid. So, and I'll show you, the lid will now fit just fine. So let's get this ready. And it's all right if this isn't a perfect fit. We just need to, I want to get a little more TLS in there. I really want to have TLS in here. I want this handle to stay on. And it will be easier when we put the leaves around it. And I'm not worried about a little mess here. I'm going to use a toothpick to kind of even it out. I think since this is wanting to tip, I'm going to take just a tiny bit of this green. Because we want this handle to remain relatively upright. Hopefully I'm keeping my head out. I think I'm keeping my head well back from the where I've got the camera set up, but I'm never positive. All right. There we go. Let's get that. And it does help if you use a tool. What I'm trying to do is just, we're going to put leaves over that. So now I'm going to bake this for 10 minutes. That way I know that this stem / handle won't fall off while I'm working with this to put the leaves on. If I tried to put everything on at once, I don't want quite that much of a lump. I'm glad I picked this up. I want to work that down. Use my thumb in there. I would have a very hard time keeping this handle right where I want it if I was trying to put the leaves on at this point. So I'm going to bake this for 10 minutes, let it cool to room temperature again, and then we can put the decorative leaves on. So I'll be right back. All right, those of you that are really paying attention may notice this looks a little different than it did a few seconds ago. That's because this is a new lid, and I'll tell you more about that later, and I will cover it thoroughly in the blog post. But I made a new lid so we can put the leaves on. So we are going to be creating our leaves from more of this green clay. Excuse me. I'm going to make some little balls of clay. First, I'm going to make 2, and then I'm going to see if I like the size. I'm making 2 so I know that I'm making them the same size. All right, I'm going to make a teardrop, and I'm going to flatten that teardrop out. And, okay, I need to go just a little bit smaller than that. That looks like a better size now. Let's get out my circle. Let's get a look at what size these are. Let's see. They're just barely a 1/4 inch. I measured it there off screen. I'm getting a little too much stuff in my area where I'm filming, so that's a better size. So I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to make a bunch of little balls of clay. I'm not sure how many I'm going to want. So I'm going to make a bunch of them, and when I get them all made, I'll come back and we'll start forming them into leaves. All right, I've made quite a few of these little balls. So now the next step, after you get a nice round ball, is go along to each one, and you'll notice off the side I have been playing around and getting some set up. And it's all right if these are not all the same size. In fact, that's probably better that your little clay balls are not the same identical size. That's why I didn't measure them. I just kind of eyeballed it, because you want your leaves to have a little bit of variety. So I'm going to go through, and what I'm doing, I'm just pushing on one end, or one side of the ball, and rolling to form a teardrop. That's the easiest way that I know to form a teardrop. And it works pretty well most of the time. All right. Now, I'm going to go along. I'm going to point these all about the same direction towards me, because I want some consistency when I go to make my lines. And I'm just using my finger and pressing these down to form a little leafy shape. And I probably won't use all of these, but I don't know. I'm not sure how many leaves I'm going to want. So all right, now all of them are more or less leaf shaped. I like my dental tool for the next step because it's the perfect angle, and I'm just going to put a few lines. And if they're not all perfect, that's okay. I looked online at strawberry cookie jars, and most of them had the leaves done in kind of this style. And if your leaf loses its point, just kind of use the tip of your tool here to. And obviously we're going to save the ones we like the best for the top, or for the places where they're going to show the most. All right, now, and I still have my little thing of aluminum foil because I am going to set this in here to bake it. So I'm going to attempt to do this and keep it where you guys can see it. And when I put these on, you're really going to see how much the clay changes in color when it bakes. Nothing wrong with that. It's just a property of the clay. Some clays I've noticed change more than others. All right. Oh, perfect. All right. You can put more or less leaves on yours. And you can really see why, the way I'm handling this, why I wanted this all pre-baked. If I was trying to do this with that stem still soft and the lid still soft, it would be really hard to get this all in place the way I want it. Now you could do one row of leaves, or you can do multiple rows of leaves. Layers. I'm gonna, I think, kind of do, I'm gonna put a few, I think, on a top row. I'll see how it looks. All right, get those right where you want them. And now I want to put a few of the leaves I really like on a top row. See if I can set this down and still be able to do what I want. I'm going to use a tool and kind of press that down like that. Ah, come on, pick up, pick up. I guess I'm going to use you first. And if at any point you decide that you are doing more damage than you are doing good here by smushing leaves that you already have on, we could pre-bake this now. You know, make sure all of these have the lines on them we want. I could neaten up the ends, and I could bake this, and then I could pull it out and add more leaves. I'm not going to, because mine's behaving itself pretty well. All right, now do I have one more leaf I like? I don't. I don't like any of those. So that's easy to fix. Come on. I've got just a little bit of TLS on my fingers, so everything's sticking to them. That's a little better. And I am putting this, this row of leaves is going, where was I going to put this? I think it was right there. Is going on top of unbaked clay, so I don't need the TLS on this layer, the second layer. All right, let's see if I can get some clay worked up into there. All right, now go through and kind of, if you've got a few leaves you're not liking, kind of, and I don't like that TLS there because that might look cloudy when it bakes. All right, I like that. I'm going to sit on top of this foil, and on top of my plate, I'm going to bake this for, I think I'm going to give it 15 minutes because I've got a lot of clay there. When it's baked and cooled, I will be back. All right, now that this has been baked and it's completely cooled, I love how this came out, except for I don't know if the camera's picking up, there's a little tiny bit of clay there that's not straight. So I'm going to attempt to, trim that off. And even though it looks a little scuffed, you won't even notice once the clear finish is on. and it's going to be where it doesn't show anyway. So I've already, since this is actually a redo of this, I've already glazed this with a thin coat of Mod Podge. So I'm going to do that one, this one. I'm using gloss Mod Podge. I'm going to put just a tiny bit out. I'm going to try and put out just a little bit that I need. And of course I get a whole bunch. And this is some of the gloss Mod Podge that Plaid sent me, as well as one of the brushes they sent. And rather than trying to hold this and do a good job of doing this, of coating it, I like to put it onto a craft stick with some of that blue poster tack stuff. That way I can turn this upside down. I can hold it any way I want to. Now, something I know a lot of people talk about, well, they don't use Mod Podge on clay because it can get sticky, especially gloss. Of all the cookie jars I've done in this series, and we've been doing cookie jars monthly since I think January. I don't remember when we started, but we've done several cookie jars. There's quite a few in the collection. I don't remember how many. I should get them all out and take a picture of them all together again. But we've got several cookie jars in this series. Only one of those has come out slightly tacky. And I knew when I did it, I don't remember which one it is, but I remember thinking to myself, I'm putting on the Mod Podge too thick, but I was in a hurry because I had to finish up getting that coated because I had to do something else, or else I needed to get the video up. I don't remember which. So I put on more than I knew I should, and as a result, it turned out sticky. And so what I'm going to do at a later date is just go back and put a very thin top coat on that one, and it will fix it. All right, so I'm going to get this worked out to very, very thin. You want very little Mod Podge on here. And I love this. I thought I loved the first one that had issues. I love this one more. And I think, I'm going to tell you honestly, I think this is my favorite of all the cookie jars we've done. I love this. So I am going to let this dry. I am going to clean up my brush, and when this is dry, we will look at the entire cookie jar together. I'll show you the first lid I made and talk to you about what I did wrong, but that'll all be once this is dry. So I'll be right back. All right, our Mod Podge has dried, and I have to say I absolutely love the way this turned out. Now, the first lid I did, I kind of like the leaves coming down like that, but they were so fragile that I ended up having to glue one of them. I actually had it all glazed with Mod Podge and went to put the lid on to record the outro for the video, and one of the leaves bent. So Sculpey 3 is just too fragile to make the leaves hang down. But now that I've got this one done, I like it so much better. I love how this turned out. I did make the leaves quite a bit thicker on here, and I think they look more like the cookie jars that I saw online. I love this. This is so cute. Now, the other option that I thought about, and I decided not to do it, but I'm going to throw it out there in case you want to. You could take a slightly darker green and just do a wash on just the leaves. Now that the clay is sealed, I wouldn't do that before I sealed the clay with Mod Podge. Once this is dry, now that this is dry, you could go through, do just a light wash of a darker green acrylic paint, and then do a second coat of Mod Podge on top of that. That would bring out your texturing, but I like it this way. You could do the same thing with the jar, either a darker color or even do a yellow so it just went in the holes, but I'm going to leave it this way. I love this. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Be sure and check the blog post for photos. If you like the video, hit the like button. Leave me a comment. What would you like to see in future tutorials? If you enjoy my content and haven't subscribed, be sure and hit that subscription button and the notification bell so you know when I put up a new video. I want to thank you very much for watching my tutorial, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.